Hughes. I'm the Communications and Partnerships Manager at Paris 21. Now, at first I was shocked when they put us in this huge room, but, and I thought maybe they confused us with maybe a pop band or something, and they thought we were going to sing a song. But then I thought, actually, it's because this is probably one of the most important topics that we'll have at this event. This is a topic about data use. And we talk so much about all the exciting new technologies around AI, satellite imagery. We don't spend enough time talking about how that information is used. Because after all, that's why we're here. We're here to make the world a better place, to use data for good, for sustainable development. Now, one number you'll hear quoted often in this event is that 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced every day. Now, I have no idea what a quintillion is, but I looked it up. And in 3 days, that equals every grain of sand that exists on the Earth. That's how much data is produced every single day. But what happens to that data? How is it used? What do we do with it? What do we do it to change the world, to support sustainable development? That is what my distinguished panel will talk about here today. Now, SDSN Trends and Open Data Watch, the two organizations that are hosting this session, have been doing some excellent work in this area. Their Overcoming Data Graveyards project establishes a transformational process for national statistical systems so that we can use the data that's produced for good. The project was supported by GIZ and aims to demystify data. Now, I could probably talk, say a few things about this topic, but I'm not an expert, and the person who will be introducing the session will talk about it much more eloquently than I will, and I'll introduce her in a few seconds. We will have an introductory presentation that will explain the Data Graveyards project, followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A. And last of all, we will have a distinguished speaker join us, Mr. Liu Xiaoxiao, who will present some closing remarks to us. Now, I'll introduce you to the person who will set things off, Shaida Badi. If you work in the data and statistics space, you must know Shaida. She's one of the power women of the statistical world. She's a fountain of ideas, of innovation, of inspiration, and she's also a great cook. So, let me turn things over to Shaida, who will present the opening. Thanks.
Thank you, Sasha. And for that introduction, I better do well, don't I? So I'm going to be opening this session with a result and sharing with you some of the work we have done, which we have decided to name it Overcoming Data Graveyards in Official Statistics. Some people thought it was a horrible name, but other people thought it was a great name because it really catches your attention of what we're trying to achieve with this research. And of course, we have the experts here from KNBS, from National Statistics of Colombia and Kenya, and experts from China, and our dear friend Claudia, who would be talking about some of the sort of underground or some of the practices that are underway in overcoming data graveyards. Sasha actually mentioned, and I'm supposed to change the slides. So, oops. Sasha actually mentions the problems that we are facing right now with data graveyards, with many billions and billions of data gets generated. We see them from all the investments that are coming to data. We see them from the private sector data producers. We see them from the citizen-generated data that's produced. SDG, of course, has created an environment of lots of data being produced. But are all those data being used? And our research shows that we are far from using the data and making an impact with that data. And everybody can benefit from sharing solutions with each other on how best we can increase the value of existing data and building new data. I must say, data use for me, as I've gotten more and more into it, I've found out that it's a very complex topic, and this research actually showed, and I'm sure those of you in statistical offices know how complex the topic is. The name is very simple, data use. But when you look at it, there's all sorts of enabling environment issues and all sorts of other things that you have to deal with. But but also we see the benefit of the data use. And in many areas where we didn't think data use can really have an impact, like building trust, in transparency, in trying to get advocacy and more resources to the data producers, data use has, of course, a huge impact on that. So I hope we all convinced that it's a very important topic and we need to come together and partner and do something about it. So this research that we did was basically, as we usually do in statisticians, we take a survey. So we took a survey of the countries, trying to understand what are the issues that they see, challenges, and how do they define, and what do they do, what are the issues for the data use. But the NSOs were very kind to us, and we got something like 50 countries that responded very comprehensively. And then we do in-depth case studies in a number of countries. Colombia, I really appreciate the work that you have done. Mexico, Philippines, and UK, National Statistical Office, helped us to even get deeper into understanding what are the challenges for data use. So as a result of that work, we came up with try to simplify a framework, a conceptual framework for improving data use. And what you see here, basically in the blue section, is we try to identify what are some of those barriers that we see for data use that came from our research. And I was surprised, in fact, to see that governance and capacity to govern data is one of the main issues. And right behind it is, of course, some of the NSOs we found out that maybe do not have the clean and clear mandate for improving data use. Maybe some of the statistics laws, some of the budgeting, some of their sort of articulation of mandate needs to be, or guidelines needs to be revised. And then the second barrier we saw is, of course, capacity to meet user needs. Whether, again, is related to the mandates, but it's also related whether national statistical offices have the right channels to get to the users, interact with them, engage with them, get their feedback. And users means ministries inside the government or other ministries, researchers, academic, all range of users. And the third thing, of course, no surprise to everybody, is to improve data use. We need to improve the capacity for data literacy, for data use, and for driving messages and stories and important policy lessons from data. So those are the sort of a simplified way of defining a framework for data use. And of course, at the bottom of that framework, you see that what we're trying to say is, with that framework, we can achieve improved decisions, effective governance, and of course, improving public services and public goods, and improving the governance accountability. One quick look at this framework is almost like you can build trust based on this. Because if you have good governance at the beginning, you have good governance that you want to, to connect to your users, get feedback, that really builds a lot of trust between producers and users of statistics. So the key findings, I basically told you the key findings, so I went over this slide as well, was that the data governance is very important, again, for organizational strategy policies that create and thrive culture of data use is very important. So I think we will hear from our country representatives on how data use can be better integrated and strengthened within data governance, and the role of data stewards, and its leadership would be recognized, the importance of data use be recognized by leadership. Meeting the needs of the users, we just discussed that, and improving, of course, the use of data and skills for using data. Like any research that we do, when we come to this sort of the conclusions of the research, we find out a lot of things, we demystify a lot of things, but we also find out we need to know more. So this research also showed us that we need some further work needs to be done. We need to do better in measuring data use. And we realized that it is very complex, and I hope we get to discuss that as is it possible? Can we can we have a measure or a set of measures to be able to sort of monitor whether national statistical offices or organizations are making progress on such an important goal. We also found out that this data use really needs to be advocated more. There's a mystery around it. It needs to be, demystified. It needs to be explained that, it's not like you just put up a database and you announce it on, on Twitter and you have data use. It's really a complex process between production and use that we need to invest in. So as I close my discussions, I wanted to also, Sasha, if I may, pose some questions or reflections for the panel, if we can build it into our discussions. One is on the challenges, and for our speakers to see where do you see capacity challenges for greater data use. And another question is, of course, on the solutions and opportunities, and what works when building a culture of data use? What are the governance mechanisms, organizations, and people that need to be involved in building a culture of data use? And is it dreaming or is it possible to come up and have a world where there is a much more natural culture of evidence-based informed policies and data use? So with that, I stop, and of course, I'm looking forward to hearing from our very esteemed panelists. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Shada. I think those things that you identified, governance, capacity around meeting needs, and capacity around data use are really so important in this context where data is changing so rapidly. And the role of statistical organizations within this context is also changing. So the world is becoming much more data rich. It's becoming rife with data. And it's something where I think we need to confront these issues of governance, of how statistical systems respond to these situations. So without speaking more, let me introduce our very distinguished panel who's with us today. McDonald George Obudo is the Director General of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. KNBS has really been at the forefront of many of these issues of data use. They're a very visible NSO that has thrived on innovation and on partnerships and has used that to make data much more effective and efficient. Leonardo Trujillo, who is the Deputy Director of the National Administrative Department of Statistics of Colombia. Colombia, as you know, will be the host of the next UN World Data Forum. So what he says today is extremely important and we should all listen. Claudia Wells is the International Hub Director of Development Initiatives. I'm sure many of you know development initiatives, but I think they're really one of those landmark organizations that exemplifies the data use issues, and that is really focusing on leveraging data for poverty eradication and for sustainable development. And we're thrilled that DI is with us today. And of course, Mr. Liu Xiaoxiao, who's not a panelist, but who will speak at the end of the session, is a distinguished professor of management practice at the Guangzhou School of Management, Peking University. And of course, he's the former Deputy Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics of China. So we'll hear from our panelists first, and then Mr. Liu Xiaoxiao will speak at the end. And we would love to hear your questions. So please think about some questions for the panelists, and you'll have an opportunity to ask them after the panel discussion. So let me start by asking a rapid-fire discussion to all of our panelists. The first question is, why is overcoming data graveyards important? Why are we here today? Let me start with you, Mr. Trujillo. Please tell us, why is this such an important topic?
Thank you. When I first saw the title of this session, I thought it's very sad to think that there are data graveyards because national statistical offices spend lots of time, budget, and personnel doing these statistics, and then it's no use. So I was thinking also how to optimize these resources in order to produce information that is certain to be used data by users. In order to guarantee this information is really going to be used, we have to take different elements into account. The first one is that the information that we produce needs to be relevant, accurate, and timely in order to offer decision-making, not only circumscribed to the public sector, but acknowledging the wide set of users, and thus producing high-quality information. We need also to assure that the information that we provide complies with the fundamental principles of official statistics, and specifically the provisions regarding privacy and confidentiality. As a statistician, we must acknowledge that people need information that is provided, that is understandable and user-friendly, and we need to invest in data literacy, as highlighted by the report of the W and the SDSN, and understand the needs of our users, whether they are specialized or not, and also by other producers of statistics in the data ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Understanding the needs of our users is such an important topic, and it's something that really adds to the relevance of data. So let me turn to KNBS now. Obudo, please share us with your thoughts.
Thank you. For the Kenyan case, it's not any different from what is happening in Colombia. And of course, there is a big interest in ensuring that data is properly utilized. One, because it takes quite a lot of resources to produce the same. And if not put in good use, then it means we are just wasting resources. The second thing is that decision making is meant to be driven by data. Now, without that, it means that again resources are going to be misplaced. Formulation of policies also require data. That's when we will be able to come up with mature policies that are able to give proper interventions where they are required. And so without this, then again, that's another challenge. Now, the user needs is also changing very fast, and of course, we need to realign ourselves with that. Now, to deal with these challenges that we are experiencing, one is to ensure that the issue of low literacy level in data use is managed very well. So that means we need to have very good education to our clients. It is also important that the data is well disaggregated to a level that it can be useful. You know, we need to move away from the issues of producing big reports. After producing that, you disseminate it once, and it does not respond to specific needs of the people or segments of the population. So that means not everybody can use it. And of course, there is also the problem of having outdated data. Yes, it is important, you know, whatever data that is produced, as Shahid had said, you are still able to use it for a long period of time. In fact, I've realized that we are using data from that was produced in 1982, 84, 92, 94, 2005, 2016, being put together so that we are able to generate some trends, especially on matters to deal with food security and nutrition. But for immediate intervention, you require data that will respond to that need at that time. So when it is outdated, it becomes an issue, and this is also something that we need to move away from. The last point that I would give here is about the producer-user relationship. You know, if the producer, that is the Bureau of Statistics, does not know exactly what the users require, then you might not be very relevant in what you're producing. So as sources of or producers of statistics, we need to be ahead of what our users require. That's when we'll be able to satisfy their needs. Otherwise, without that, then it is very possible for our data to get to the graveyard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those two issues, data literacy and disaggregation, I think are so critical to this aspect of data use. And I hope we can put a pin on those and come back to them when you do further comments about how KNBS has actually been working in this area. So thank you. Claudia, last but not least.
Thank you, Sasha. So this is going to be a very difficult question for me to answer quickly, because data use is what drives me to my core. As I left university as a young mathematician into the world, what did I want to do? I wanted to change people's lives. I wanted to make the world better. And I thought, how do I do this? I didn't go into the field of statistics. And hands up here, I'm also, my background before I joined development initiatives, I'm from a national statistics office as well. But the reason I wanted to join the National Statistics Office was to make the world a better place, to inform policies that improve people's lives. And without the use of that data, you're not making that happen, which is why it has to be embedded in the absolute core of everything that we do. And to me, it's just fundamental. And I had the absolute privilege of working under a really inspiring national statistician, who I'm sure many of you will know, John Pullinger. And what he said to us as young statisticians working under him was, you've got to step up, step forward, and step on the gas. It's simply not good enough just to produce your statistics. You've got to get out there, you've got to understand your users, you've got to explain to them why this information is so important. You've got to help them use those statistics, and you've got to tell stories. And it's really interesting that the one thing that made me leave that job that I was so passionate about was when I saw an advert for a director of data use at my current organization, Development Initiatives, an organization that's so passionate about getting data effectively used to change policy globally and improve people's lives, reduce poverty, increase resilience, and reduce inequality. And what I can see from the work that we've done is that it takes a village to do this, and the partnerships across it are so important. Like you were saying, as national stats officers, you've got to be almost ahead of what your users need is in order to be able to produce the statistics that meet the current need of the time. So how do you do that? And the only way that you can do that is by really understanding your user, by really understanding your citizens, and by really understanding the issues that are at play. And it's with partnerships with civil society and citizens who are often ahead of the game, ahead of what the policymakers are thinking about, who are telling you what the critical issues are. You need to work with the academics to build the methodologies and techniques to be able to measure that real lived experience and those new issues that are emerging. And then you need to work with policymakers to get that information used. And it's a really, really long journey. It can take 10 years, 15 years to finally see the fruits of that work that you're doing. But if you stick with it, if you have the use at the heart of everything that you do, and as part of those partnerships that you build, you will see change. And I've seen that myself, which is why I'm here today.
Thanks so much, Claudia. I love the fact that you said, you have to use data to tell stories. That's something I'm always hammering at my colleagues about, that we have to tell stories. But I think, your perspective is really interesting, because one thing that you brought up is, the fact that the NSO is really only one part of the statistical system, and today, often can risk being drowned out by many of the other actors that are much more visible, social media companies, telecom companies, and that we actually have to partner across the board to make data use work. Great. So thank you very much. Let me go back to Mr. Obudo now. If you can dive a little bit more deeply into Kenya's data dissemination policy and explain how that really worked and how that helped to ensure data use, and talking about those critical issues that you mentioned of disaggregation and data literacy, how KNBS has worked there and how it's turned that into policy implementation.
Thank you. First, the data dissemination and access policy came into being in 2016, and that is not far away. That is just the other day, and the Bureau has been in existence for a very long time. But this was driven by the fact that first, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 actually provided for the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4 in it, Article 35, which gave clearly the people the power to access data, and especially the public data. And so we needed to align ourselves to that, so that we are able to serve the Kenyan public in a much better way. The second thing is that it also, the same constitution also created the County Development Act, which is also helping now the counties. We have 47 counties, which is the second level of government. And in those counties, they are meant to come up with their own development plans. And the development plan, which they are calling the county the county integrated development plan, and they are meant to use a lot of data. And so we needed this kind of a policy just to ensure that people are aware of what is happening. And the second point about it is that we needed to get a situation where the producers and users are able to easily come together on a round table and discuss, so that we get to understand what do our users require. Our users will also get to understand what kind of issues do we have, so that moving together, we are able to understand each other, we are able to move along as a team. This is something that we have done. And the other issue is that in our Statistics Act, there is a provision for the, other than the collection of data and analyzing that data, there is the element of the dissemination. Now, that dissemination component of it would require that we are able to be guided by something, and this thing that is to guide us is actually that policy. This is also something that we are using, and it is also giving us a space to ensure that we also align ourselves to the government requirement, because the government came up with the data, the open data initiative, which then required all the institutions that are producing data to pull it together and have it in one repository, so that it can easily be reached, it can easily be used. And so that has also given us a chance to realign ourselves, and that could only be, we could easily do it through the, coming up with the policy on dissemination and access to data. And so in this, we are also supported so much by our board of directors that made it very easy for us to have resources and come up with the policy, which we were able to implement. Now, through the policy, the public now gets to know what is it that the Bureau has, when do you expect some information to be released, in what format, so that we are able to somehow respond to the needs of the people in real time.
Thank you very much. That is fascinating. You know, I think one of the things, especially I want to pick up on in a few minutes, is this, bringing producers and users together, and how we build trust between those two communities, how we strengthen communication, how we ensure that people understand the different perspectives of those communities and of the actors within them. So we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But I want to go to Mr. Trujillo now. So let's talk a little bit about how Danny has really worked on legislation and in collaboration with academia to help move the needle on official statistics in terms of use.
Thank you. SDSN Trends and Open Data Watch developed a framework to understand existing barriers to effective data use. All this framework can be summarized in a simple equation, that is better governance and enhanced capacity to reach the user's needs, and better data literacy is equal to no data graveyards. So through the efforts in the Colombian Congress, we have engaged in a long-standing dialogue with ourselves and with our users, enabling to enshrine these three core ideas in our new bill of law for the production of official statistics in Colombia. At the moment, we are working in this statistical law for official statistics. It's in the third discussion out of the 4 discussions in the Senate. Regarding better governance, the bill of law builds on cutting-edge literature, both public and private, recognizing the importance of establishing an effective legal framework for action, recognizing international standards as OECD and ECLAC. And one of our main work streams in the future is enhancing the use of administrative records, which tell us we cannot do our work alone. At the moment, DANE itself produces around 106 statistical operations between census and surveys out of the 401 statistical operations on the National Statistical System. Now, regarding administrative records, DANE is responsible of 233 administrative registers out of the 527 in the whole system. Then this law is going to reinforce the need to work collaboratively with all the institutions involved as producers and users in the National Statistical System and provides solid political ground to foster integrations, allowing to avoid the duplication, and provides solid political ground to foster integrations. Regarding that data use, DANE has already shifted and is now mainstreaming the main use of the GSBPM standard into all its statistical operations. And as you might be aware, the first phase of this process is focusing on having a wide understanding of what are the user's needs. A quality assurance program in which we ask the different stakeholders how relevant and useful is the information that we produce has allowed us to build stronger relations with groups such as the LGBTI community, indigenous and Afro-descendants, paving out the way to design statistical operations to make them count in public policy. Some examples include the LGBTQI survey, mainstreaming the ethnic approach into all DANE's statistical operations, and strengthening the data literacy capabilities of indigenous communities, building a common ground for collaboration. So the importance to know what are the user's needs has helped us to recognize the limitations of traditional statistical approaches. Our Bill of Law has also included mechanisms to foster innovation and break with fake trade-offs between timeliness and disaggregation, fostering the innovation, the use of elements such as small area estimation, and the use of geospatial data to produce more relevant, timely, and cost-efficient indicators in areas such as migration, informality, poverty mapping, and also including family planning. Data literacy is also a challenge for us all, and I had encountered the challenge before joining DANE, because before joining DANE, I was a statistics professor, and I realized that even if I spend 6 hours per week talking about the importance of surveys and censuses, it is something hard to grasp and understand. That's why DANE, in our 70th anniversary, are exploring new ways in which we can work with our stakeholders and how we can work best with our organization, fostering interdisciplinary dialogues and learning from each other's failures and successes.
Thank you so much. I love that aspect of innovation, working with stakeholders to identify ways to be more innovative to ensure data use uptake. I also like what you said about admin data, because we know from the CT Gap survey, which is a survey of NSOs that we do with the World Bank and UNSC, that admin data is becoming much, much more important for national statistical offices. And so getting buy-in from government and convincing them to share data with you and to work collaboratively with the NSO is critical. So maybe we can come back to that in a few seconds as well. But I want to talk to Claudia. So we've had a very good country's perspective so far, but I want to talk about the role of non-governmental organizations, international organizations in this conversation. So, I mean, especially on gender data. I know that's a critical topic for you and is one for us as well. So from where you sit, how does the picture look?
Again, a huge, huge question, Sasha, that will be very difficult to answer succinctly. I mean, we've been working to support subnational access to data, supporting that level of local governance at the smallest level that you can think of, the civil registration office, the school governor, the health professional, and it's at this level that you really need to think about capturing all types of data on people, especially gender data, because you're absolutely right, administrative data is vital, especially when you're thinking about gender data, because we really need to be honest. We're really very far from having the visibility that we need on gender equality, what that looks like at a global, national, and especially local level, with less than half the data that we've got that we need to measure SDG 5. And for me, this starts with really thinking beyond our census and survey information, as vital as that is, and it is absolutely vital, because we need to sort of blow out that household as our unit of analysis if we're really to understand the individual and to really get a grasp on gender data. And for me, as I said, that starts with civil registration, understanding what happens at birth, all the way through to death, and all of the life events in between, which are so vital for access to services and access to social policies, especially for women and girls. It's also really vital in health management information systems at that local health provider level is really vital. And similarly with education systems, this is another vital building block for a foundational statistical system that is built on administrative data that works all the way from the local to the regional to the national level to provide a really comprehensive set of information that works alongside the vital information that comes from household surveys and from census information. Every single piece of data that's captured at that level is a person, is a harvest, and it must be gathered in a relevant and quality and timely way. And for us, what we've seen when we've tried to, where we've been working to support the use of data at that level, what's really important is that the person collecting the data understands the value of that data and uses it themselves. So this is not an issue which perhaps we might have thought about, which was we need to improve the quality of the data to facilitate use. It's about using the data to improve the quality of the system. So rather than this linear line that goes from production and quality assurance through to use, we have use right embedded at the beginning and a virtual cycle there of the more you use, the greater the quality, it increases the use. But we've got to be really honest with ourselves about what it looks like on the ground, especially in rural areas, in those towns, in those municipalities, and in those districts. Data's collected on paper. It's stored in huge binders that contain rich swathes of information about people's lives, and digitization of that information is the first key to unlock that for further use. And that is difficult in itself. So in our experience, we're working at the moment at a very, very local level, at the town, the parish level in Uganda. It's below the district level. So that information is collected on paper and then taken to the district. So it's physically moved, copied, and then moved, and then digitized onto a USB stick. USB sticks are then shared to create, for that data to be shared. So there's a huge opportunity here for digitization and technology to really support the use at that level. And it needs to go below the district level. It needs to go to the level that it's being collected so that it's digitized so that town planner can use it, as well as the district planner, as well as the National Statistics Office. And it's really vital that that happens, but we really do need to be honest with ourselves about how we really support the basics at that level. How do we support digitization? How do we ensure that the infrastructure is there, the literacy is there, the physical kind of infrastructure is there, and it works? A lot of times this is about basic services, basic electricity, basic skills around digitization and data use. And then all of a sudden you can unlock this value that becomes a real backbone of a robust system and have use at the heart of what it does. And then you need to work on these partnerships that I was talking about before, which is all about the kind of social impact side. But I think it's just really important to think about that technology and digitization and what it can do to really kind of leapfrog use at that subnational level.
Thanks, Claudia. Wow, it was an expansive question, but I think you gave a very good response, and many things that I want to pick up, and many interesting things, but especially this issue of, CRVS data. I think I read that 40% of women in low and middle income countries can't prove home ownership. So CRVS systems still need a huge amount of work in many countries, and as you say, digitization. I mean, going to the local level, getting information that's on paper in binders, and stored in filing cabinets somewhere is a huge issue. And I hope if there are any wealthy companies listening, or donors or foundations that have huge reach and huge pockets, they will immediately jump out and support development initiatives, ODW, SDSN trends and other organizations working in these areas. So let me stop there for 2 seconds and just maybe see if there are any burning audience questions. I know it's been an interesting session so far, but please, if you have any questions, don't be shy, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to share them with the panel. Yes, please go ahead. I think we have a question here in the middle. Thank you for being the first. It's always difficult to break the ice, so we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Robert Msuya from Virtual Strategies based in New York office. This is a very good session, and one of the challenges, of course, of data use uptake is, you've mentioned, is data quality. And especially if for routine generated data, one of the challenges is coverage and completeness. So in terms of data use, there are two parts. One is data used to improve data quality, and the other part is data used for informing policy and decision-making process. So when you have like CRVS data or HMIS data, that's low completeness estimate, when can you use that data for policy and for influencing decision-making process? Is there a threshold or anything that can guide us on how to use that data? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I think this issue of data quality is vital, and especially as we look at things like new data sources and non-traditional data sources. How do we ensure sufficient quality standardization to make that data useful? So I don't know who wants to answer that question, if anyone wants to volunteer, or I'll just put you on the spot.
Maybe I could say something on that. Now, data quality, well, is an issue, not only from the data that is coming from outside, but even data that is generated by the NSOs. But for the NSOs, there are clear approaches of dealing with that. Now, what is coming from outside could be a bit tricky. And for our case, we have developed a criteria of looking at the quality of data that is actually generated from outside the Bureau of Statistics. And so for our criteria, we have just the elements of the quality of statistics, and the relevance, the methodology used, and the like, 1, 2, 3, up to 6. And then on the other side, we have given them the rating. You want to look at the relevance of the statistics, you want to look at the timeliness, you want to look at the methodological approach, and rate them by having, for our case, what we have done, we have classified them as high, medium, low, and then 0. So that high is given a point of 3, medium is given point of 2, low is given point of 1, and 0, of course, is 0. That means it is completely out of consideration. And so, looking at all those elements, we'll be able to rate them at the end and get to see, is it something that we can qualify for as fit for use? Then, using such kind of criteria, we'll be able to guide the process and say that this one can be used to an extent. Of course, we'll be able to still give some disclaimer about it, so that even users get to know what kind of limitation do we have with such kind of information. But it would be better than nothing, especially when we are talking of something that the Bureau is not able to produce, and it is lying somewhere. It is produced by other entities out there. So if it can meet some standard, we are able to use that. Yeah. Thank you.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, I think having transparency and having a system in place so that people understand the criteria by which data quality is being judged, I think is a really crucial element. So let me quickly turn to see if there are any other questions in the audience. Please, go ahead, please, sir. Oh, sorry, Claudia. Sorry, apologies.
I'll come back on that one, if I'm allowed, Sasha.
No, please. Yeah, let's hear from Claudia first, then we'll go to you.
I do also think that sometimes we tie ourselves up in knots over this question of quality. And I agree with my esteemed colleague here from Kenya. Absolutely, transparency around collection and, in particular, metadata is key. But I think also we need to shift ourselves from thinking about one source of data as a single source of truth. you should be looking at one source of data among many sources. And using many sources to create that rich picture that tells us about the complex picture of people's lives, and not just relying on one. And that's why the metadata is key. That's why interoperability between sources is key, but also why we should be using data from many different sources to tell us that one thing, rather than waiting for a single source to reach such a high quality that we can say this is the source of truth. Now, that isn't, I'm not saying throw away your standards and official statistics, because absolutely they're the gold standard, and it's really important that in particular the NSOs uphold them in the data that they collect. The surveys, the beautifully stratified household surveys that they do, and samples household surveys, but that doesn't mean that they can't be complemented with other sources of data that may not reach those same standards, but do tell you things that you might not know about. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, is what I would say.
Absolutely, no, a critical point, and I think as the world is becoming, much more complex, but also as our power to collect data and as people's power to produce data on their own lives is becoming much more important, I think that's a really, really important aspect. So thank you. Thank you. I think we had a question in the back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all the speakers. I'm a teacher from Zhejiang Gongshan University. Welcome to Hangzhou. I think that many times the demand for data exceeds the supply capacity of statistical bureau. There are many factors that handle the flow of data. And the government have done a lot to improve it. And this is also the case in China. Many firms and departments tend to treat data as their private after opening it. Research is also underway on how to record and evaluate data in towards 2025 system national account. So would you mind give us some ideas on how to better overcome data graveyard from the perspective of data capitalization or data monetization of the whole society?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Yes, I mean, so given the low capacity of many statistical offices, yet the rapid pace at which many private sector firms, the business world is moving to collect data, how can we, do we find incentives from the monetization of data or from public-private partnerships, for example, where we can help to move the needle forward on data use? So, Leonardo, I'm not sure if you have an answer to that one. It's a tricky question, but I know Colombia has done some work on public-private partnerships that might be interesting here.
Well, each type of data has its own advantages and disadvantages. I think the integration of all the possible sources is one of the possibilities. I mentioned also the use of administrative registers because we can integrate survey censuses and administrative registers, but also the use of optional sources, like for example, satellite imagery, or for example, the use of light radiance photographs. And the integration of all these systems could improve the use of statistics.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm sure some of you have some other questions, and I would love to get to them, but I think in the interest of time, I want to give our distinguished colleague, Mr. Li Xiaoxiao, space to present his closing remarks. So if I may, I'll turn to him, but please do feel free to ask any questions offline in the chat, and we'll endeavor to answer them if we can, or please feel to grab one of our panelists throughout the week. Thank you. As you like, as you like. Please.
Distinguished moderator, dear friends, good afternoon. to have this meeting in such a big room, I think it gives us some greater imagination. And all of our panelists have shared with us very good ideas, as we have shared. They have shared with us their national organizations, their good practices. If we are put into a smaller room, then we wouldn't have that of a heated discussion, because we have received so many questions. I'm very happy to make the summary for this parallel session, and I want to say thank you to the organizer, our SDSN. And also I want to say thank you to the moderator for the wonderful work. And also I want to thank all of our panelists from Kenya, Colombia, and NGOs. Thank you for your sharing. And I think this is a very important topic. Well, those statistical data, be it in China or other countries, I have to say that statistical data for governments to govern the society, or for the enterprises to improve their business operation, it is playing a very important role. But we have to see that many data is yet to be fully digged or mined. It echoes the topic, data graveyards. So the data is yet to be tapped its full value. And as our previous experts have shared with us about the issues of data graveyards, I think we have done a very good job in answering the first question. That is why we need to discuss the topic of data graveyards, because we do face such problems. And as to the reasons behind it, is multifaceted. For our panelists from Kenya and Colombia, they have respectively introduced to us about their experience of data use, some postal ideas. It has broadened our vision through the mutual exchange. Our NGO, the idea from the NGO on how to get access and collect good data and the digitalization of data resources, they have shared with us very good practice, and I am thankful for the two participants who raised very good questions. And also I want to take this opportunity to share with you about data use. I will make it very brief. Currently in China, for the statistical data, for official statistics, monthly we have the press conference to release the data to the public. From NBS, we will release the main data to the public, and also annually, for monthly, we have publications, and also we have electronic data available to our users to provide convenience condition to our data users. And third point is for the official data for the government to better govern the society, and also for the enterprise to manage production and operation is very valuable. So now the data is pretty sensitive, and the public cares a lot about the data, because after using this data, they have felt that for their operation and business management, it is very important. Apart from that, I also want to talk to you about some of my ideas on this topic. This is a very good topic. So how to avoid data graveyards? I think first point is the data we provide should be needed or should be aligned with the need, the demand of the users. For the statistical demand should be designed centering around demand. For such indexes, for example, do we really need those index? So probably it's because of unscientific design. And so it makes us feel the data is useless. And sometimes the situation is changing. Some data in the course of economic progress, some data is playing less and less important role. But for some indexes, they are playing bigger and bigger role. So we need to change according to the change of time, and to change the design of statistics, and to change the design of the indexes based on the new demand. And also we need to improve the publication or communication. The dissemination or communication is very important. It relates to indexes. And for the general public, sometimes they find difficult to understand the meaning of the indexes. So we need to better make them understand and to tell the story so that we can better use the data and to avoid data graveyards. Third point, we need to strengthen the opening of the data. We need to build the principle of open data that has been a work advocated by the United Nations. So for different countries in terms of open data, I think there is still unevenness. Some countries open more and some countries open less. But actually, we have these numbers when we are studying the economic development of different countries and their experience. We talk about per capita GDP. If it is more than 10,000 US dollar, then there will be some new issues. But when we are collecting this data from the countries with more than 10,000 US dollar of per capita GDP, as to what are the issues, what are the problems, we are lack of such data. So that means we need to promote the open data. I think these are some of my personal idea for your reference. I'd like to share these points. All in all, this parallel session is a very good one, and we have talked a lot on some new ideas. I think for every one of us here, we have been inspired to better promote our work in statistics. This is very important. Thank you.
Mr. Li, I think it's wonderful to hear from you and from your perspective on China. You know, I mean, this is one of the reasons we're so excited to come here, because I think China has so much to teach and we have so much to learn from you in terms of the progress that you've made and some of the great ways that China is collecting and using data. And I think you left us with a very inspirational message to end on, you know, that we've really only just started to tap the full potential of data. And I think, you know, events like this where we're all working together to share our experiences, to learn from one another, are so critical. So on behalf of Open Data Watch and SDSN Trends, thank you very, very much to our distinguished panel, to Mr. Li, to everyone, to all of you for joining and for asking your questions. And we wish you all the best for the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Your opinion is very good. Okay. Well, you are very good. Yeah.